Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm RJ from Heritage Radio Network. This is Amuse News. We are on an adventure through the food world, as I've mentioned on all these episodes. And as you can see, I started this episode with two guests. I guess, Todd, can you just start by introducing yourself? I'll just get into it that way.
Sure. Hey, I'm Todd Shulkin. I'm the Executive Director of the Julia Child Foundation for Gastronomy and Culinary Arts. And as part of that role, I also serve as the Executive Director of something called the Santa Barbara Culinary Experience, which I think we'll talk about later.
Hi, I'm Lauren Salkeld. I work closely with Todd at the foundation, and I am the Director of Outreach.
Thank you both for joining. And I wanted to talk to you partially because you all have been a huge part of HRN and huge supporters of HRN for a long time, but also because a few weeks ago, I got to go to an awesome event here in New York, and we talked about the history of the foundation and the Julia Child Award. And I learned a lot just from being at that event. And I wanted to just kind of talk to you all a little bit more about that. I guess first, people have heard of Julia Child. If you've heard, if you're familiar with cooking at all, you know who Julia Child is probably. But how did the foundation come about, and what's sort of the brief history of how the foundation came to be?
Sure, I'll kick it off and maybe talk a little bit about the background, and then Lauren can bring us back to 2024. It's kind of interesting and unique in that Julia actually started the foundation when she was still alive in 1995, but it was specifically designed to be dormant until after she died. So it's pretty old, but it didn't become active. Julia died in 2004, and given all the things that happen after someone, particularly someone illustrious, dies, the foundation didn't even start any activities on earnings until 2006. I think the more interesting part is why Julia created it and what she created it to do. And there's a little wrinkle to that, which is there's also events that happened that changed that trajectory that Julia could have never anticipated and didn't know about. So I think, I can't read Julia's mind and I can't speak for her, but the inference that most people have is Julia thought, I don't have any children. I'm by nature, I don't think she proactively thought this, but by nature, she was a very charitable, philanthropic person. And she thought, I don't know what's going to be left from my archive and my copyrights, but I'd like that to go to an entity that would kind of try to do a bit of what I was committed to doing, which was really advancing the profession of the food industry. And that's chefs, food writers, everyone who make it an actual profession and industry, and very much everything that Heritage Radio Network seeks to showcase. But then on top of that, she left everything to the foundation. She left her rights of personality, which are sometimes called publicity rights, which are legally called publicity rights. And that I think she didn't anticipate would be such a big part. She left all of her copyrights to the foundation. So that means all her rights in her books where she is the lead author. That's not actually all of them. She doesn't own any of her programming, but she has certain rights and responsibilities that carry on after death. So all of that went to the foundation. And I think that's been a bigger thing than she would have anticipated in terms of what we work on. I think her idea was to make it a charitable foundation, which give grants, which Lauren will talk about in a second, and that would be the main thing. It would collect royalties and give these grants and just kind of carry on after Julia, which is indeed a prong of what we do. And, that was very forward thinking. She also died in California to get legal on folks. California has much stronger rights of publicity than other states. New York does too, but it's not a federal thing. So if you're famous, you want to die in California, it's going to be a lot easier way to protect your legacy. So that's like the backstory on the foundation.
Okay. So yeah, as Todd mentioned, the foundation's mission is really to honor and further Julia's legacy, which largely comes down to educating and encouraging people to understand the value and importance of good food and cooking. And we do that in a bunch of different ways. But our grant program is probably the biggest. And since we've been operational, we've made more than $3 million in grants. And those grants all go to food nonprofits, specifically in some of the areas Todd mentioned, culinary training and development, food writing and food media, like Heritage Radio, culinary history, food literacy, and more recently, sustainability. But in addition to our grant program, there's a bunch of other things that we use to honor and further her legacy. And that often comes down to telling Julia's story, which sometimes comes directly from us, maybe in the form of a social media post or on our website. We have this really cool timeline of her life. We also have our Heritage Radio podcast, which is an interview show where we speak to others, but Julia is all over that. And she just permeates the podcast for sure. So Julia fans really like it.
Inside Julia's Kitchen, for those of you who need a reference.
Yes. And then there's also projects that are, content projects that are not directly our projects, but are maybe things that we partner with other people on. The Julia TV show that was on Max is a good example, or we worked with her publisher, Knopf, to do this book called People Who Love to Eat Are Always the Best People. And that was a collection of Julia's quotes. She is one of the most quotable people that's ever lived. And people are always trying to quote her. So we finally put together a book with them. As it's like the authoritative source on that. And then, as Todd mentioned, a lot of Julia's legacy comes down to photos and her TV shows and her papers. So permissions are a major part of the work that we do. I personally do a lot of permissions requests and a lot more contract work than I ever imagined I would do. And then I know we're going to talk about this later.
The paralegal side of your job.
Yes, which I often feel unprepared for.
No, but you reminded me, right? Didn't you start in the contracts department at a publishing house? That was like
I did. My first job out of college was in subsidiary rights at Houghton Mifflin. I think my bosses would be shocked to know that I work that now. And then the other thing I was going to mention, and I know we're going to get into this more specifically, but the Julia Child Award is really another way that we honor and further Julia's legacy. So I'll let us wait to talk about that more.
So I was going to ask about the TV series, which was 2 seasons on HBO Max and Max after they dropped the HBO, but 2 seasons. So with the work, so it's almost like you're licensing and working on those kinds of things along with the creative stuff. Because I know that when we talked about the American History Museum and the kitchen that's there, it sounds like creatively and sort of licensing wise, you're involved with both sides of that when it comes to portraying Julia or using her name and her legacy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because I'd love to clarify that. We also have a unique situation with that. Very often, like I was talking about publicity rights and the legal side of celebrity, but generally when a celebrity dies and has an estate, there are heirs and there are people who want to make money and they license stuff like Michael Jackson and all that paraphernalia. Or the music rights and things like that. In our case, it's a little bit different because Julia had her own, I don't think Julia ever used this term, but we call it a non-commercialization policy. She did not exploit her celebrity for money, so she didn't make endorsement deals. She didn't make broadly licensing deals. And for the most part, the foundation, the trustees of the foundation have continued that tradition. And it's not because Julia mandated it. it's their interpretation of her wishes. So they've carried that on. But as a nonprofit with those rights, it makes it harder to make money comparatively. And when we were looking for ways to expand her legacy and sustain the foundation, one of our revelations was that Julia did do deals with brands or corporates for content. All of her shows, I mean, at PBS, you cannot make a show without corporate underwriting. That's the model, that's the structure. And so every one of Julia's shows was supported generally by grants, not even like, as you know, RJ, like there are like Ford Foundation and MacArthur and things like that that will fund nonprofit media. But in Julia's cases, it was the Polaroid Corporation. Much to our dismay, we found it was the gas company recently. And there's various iterations like that. So we felt like in those arenas where we're making content, we have a bit more license to get, funding or marketing support from a brand. So, those are ways we've been able to grow and develop new things in a way that we feel true to Julia. The other way is we've done some partnerships with the Smithsonian and specifically the National Museum of American History, which we see as one of our key touch points for the public since they house Julia's Kitchen. We have a close working relationship with them, including on the Julia Child Award. And one of the things we've also learned is if you are a foundation that is in charge or been losing the word, but basically been asked by the person who founded it to protect their rights into the future, the way the law is set up for celebrities or any property, you kind of have to make things to be able to defend them. So trademark law is very much on the basis of you're making stuff. So if you're choosing not to make stuff, that makes the rights to do so very valuable, but it also means you don't have a very good defense. So we've moved away from like, we're not going to do anything because that was Julia's wishes to we have to do some select things because otherwise we have no legal defense mechanism. And that's led us toward these collaborations with the Smithsonian. There's a book coming out, which we might talk about. We've done a small amount of merchandise in collaboration with them with Princeton Architectural Press. There's a note card set. There's a recipe keeper. And there's soon to be launched some mini notebooks. But we felt like that helps the foundation get some revenue, but we're also supporting the Food History Project at the Smithsonian. They get half the revenue. So, and they also, any product you do with the Smithsonian comes with a lot more education and information. So that's been one of our outlets to kind of protect and preserve.
That's cool. Thanks for explaining that. I mentioned at the beginning, I got to go to an event in New York at the beginning of May, and Grace Young and Danny Meyer were there talking about their work. And I was not, before I started HRN, I was not aware of like the Julia Child Award, and it was really cool and inspiring to hear the stories of these chefs who were able to basically donate money to causes that they really cared about. And I think that is probably an underappreciated aspect of the work. So could you guys just give us a quick kind of, history? Where did the award come from? How did that start? And kind of how that evolved into what it is now?
Sure. Maybe I'll cover a bit of the background and Lauren can pick up how it works. I think when I joined the foundation about 12 years ago, they had, just because Julia had so much stature in the community. And I think one of the things we didn't get to mention was that it was also very much the Julie and Julia movie that Nora Ephron did that, was released several years after Julia died. And that kind of helped catapult / solidify her fame and her iconic status. I mean, when you're played by Meryl Streep, it's a pretty good solidifier. And I think that, and then there was a celebration in 2012 of what would have been Julia's 100th birthday. And that just grew things in a bigger way. And it kind of, then also people were like, there's many James Beard Awards. Why is there not a Julia Child Award? And Julia had lent her name to certain prizes and things like that. But it took us a while to figure out, we're a very small organization. Laura and I are not even full-time staff. It's, we do a lot with a little by design. But we felt like, the award could really be a way to as Lauren talked about before, advance Julia's legacy through the people that are following in her footsteps, but also it's a mechanism to tell people more about what we're doing in general. And I think our aha moments to make it work and make it also be distinct from, there are plenty of other food awards already, like how can we contribute, was kind of three things. Make it singular, have it come with, a significant grant. It comes with $50,000 for the recipient to give to a nonprofit of their choosing, although usually there's some alignment between why they've been honored and what they choose, almost always. Correct. And then thirdly, we've got shining the spotlight on these people, we've got the grant, and then we've got the collaboration with the Smithsonian. So one of our other sort of things were to do it with them. And so every year when it's presented at the Food History Gala at the National Museum of American History, that is a fundraiser for their culinary history project. It helps support particularly their curatorial work and programming, but also the preservation of Julia's Kitchen. And so those three things kind of converging gave it a sort of meaning. It's also a singular award. We're pretty determined not to have it be like 24 categories, and to kind of give it this place that's unique in the food world and among awards.
Yeah, I can get a little bit into how the process works. I don't know if Todd mentioned this, but the recipient is chosen each year by an independent jury, which I think is also pretty significant. A woman named Tanya Steele is our award director. RJ, I know you know Tanya. She's also the head of CCAF.
Yeah.
And then we also have a jury chair, Jim Dodge, who's a very celebrated pastry chef and a good friend of Julia's. And they kind of steer everything. But then we have a jury that each juror serves a limited term. It's kind of varied over the years how long that term is. But we really think that keeps it fresh and independent and is not about, what we might think, but what these professionals in the food world think. And, they're much closer to it. At the moment, the jury is Mas Masumoto, who's an organic farmer and cookbook author, Lily Eric Isle, who's a food writer and filmmaker, Kate Crater, she's the food editor at Bloomberg Pursuits, and then Andrea Nguyen, who's an ordering cookbook author. So it's a wide range of people, but they all kind of have a connection to something that would be important to Julia. And so they make a selection based on some very specific criteria, I think, and they're pretty strict about it all, because lots of people get recommended or names get popped up, but the jury really sticks to that list. It's impressive. So they do all that, and then they're kind of done, and they hand it over to us, which again, I think keeps their work really independent. And so then we work with the Smithsonian to plan this announcement, and then the award presentation, which is the gala Todd referred to, that's a fundraiser. And we also work with the recipient to figure out where that grant money is going to go. And, it is their choice, but it's definitely a conversation that we have. And some of the choices are quite obvious. Some of the recipients have their own nonprofit, like Rick Bayless gave to the Frontera Farmer Foundation, Danny Nierenberg gave to Food Tank. So some are simple like that, but in other cases, like Todd said, it's often related to whatever work or passion, led to them receiving the award. I think Grace Young, who you mentioned being at that event, is a really good example of that. She became this advocate for the AAPI community and Chinatowns across the country. So then when she received the award in 2022, she decided to divide up that $50,000 and give it to 5 different nonprofits across the country. And they were nonprofits that were supporting Chinatown restaurants and communities. And it was really pretty awesome. They each did their own thing, but it spread the support all around the country, and I think really spoke to what she was passionate about and why she ended up receiving the award. So the only other thing I would add is that I think, especially now that we're in this 10th anniversary year, that all those recipients really become kind of part of the foundation family and network. And it's a long-term thing. We tend to work with them again, whether that means other grants or participating in events. In a funny way, oftentimes people that receive the award then present the award, or presenters then get the award. It's a really kind of cool club that they all become a part of, and that I think is going to be very evident in October when we celebrate the 10th anniversary in DC.
That's really cool. Thank you for all that background. And I want to check out the 10th anniversary party in October in DC. We don't have to get into the criteria too much, but I assume that part of it is having some kind of presence in the community or doing a certain amount of work in the community, because it seems like that's probably, at least what I've read and listened to about it. I mean, these chefs who are extremely busy and successful in their own right are also spending a lot of time being on the boards of nonprofits and volunteering and helping their communities. And it seems like that aspect of it is probably a pretty big part of what the judges look at.
There's kind of their criteria, you can see them on juliachildaward.com. There's about 8 or 9 points. That is definitely a component. Like, I don't think you will receive the award if you're not paying it forward in some way. And that could be through your own organization, but it could just be through, like in Grace Young's case, your advocacy. It's a pretty tall order. Like, basically, the award is modeled on Julia. Like, who are the next people who are doing Julia? And I always like to say, and you'll see this in the Inside Julia Kitchen episodes where we talk to the recipients, most of them have surpassed Julia and have actually done more than Julia, which on that level is even more incredible. But many of them were restaurant chefs or owned restaurants or participated in them. Julia never did that. Julia actually, while she was a very fierce advocate and participated in a lot of nonprofit organizations, she never before the foundation founded her own. So you're really talking about a quite elite, exceptional set of people, which is exactly what we want to highlight and help them. I think maybe we should also clarify too, depending on the person's age, it can look like a Lifetime Achievement Award, but it very much is not meant to be. It's meant to actually spur on the activities of someone who's doing it. Now, we've struggled to reach those heights of the criteria. It'd be very hard to be 25 and do that. But, even Jacques, who was the first recipient, there was obviously a lot of emotional reasons for that, given his longstanding relationship with Julia. But in, the recent 10 years of Jacques' life, he's been passionately running the Jacques Pepin Foundation and dedicating effort and time and resources to, training cooks. And that was exactly what the award was, designed to do, to highlight someone's efforts like that and help spur it on.
That's great. Thank you. So I guess the events that you all are doing this year as part of the 10th anniversary celebration, we've talked about this a couple of times. I was at the New York one, but I know you've done several, you have several more, and we know who the next recipient is. It was announced, I think, at the New York event. But if people can check out juliachildaward.com/events, because they're, anyone can get tickets and go to one of these. But what are you doing at the events, and how what are you hoping to accomplish at these events? Because I met a lot of people and heard these inspiring stories from Grace and Danny, and I left with a better understanding of kind of the work of the foundation. But what are you hoping to achieve by doing so many events in so many different cities?
Stressing ourselves out.
Right.
No, I mean, when we were approaching the 10th anniversary, we knew it'd be special and that we wanted to mark this milestone. Like, none of us involved had ever started an award from scratch, let alone created this program. And, it's become a whole thing. I think we're very pleased to see that it's already gaining some stature in a very short amount of time. I mean, these are a very long road. Some of it was modeled on the Pritzker Prize, which we've realized, which is the top prize in architecture, which is, I think, around 40 years old, maybe even older. And a lot of people still have never heard of that. So it's a very long time horizon to establish a prestigious award. But I think we felt like we want to celebrate the 10-year, and we were trying to figure out, because we try to do things with the mission to be cost effective. And it didn't feel right to us to just, host like a big party and spend a lot of money. And then we were like, well, what if we did some sort of road show? And what if we made it a fundraiser for the Smithsonian Food History Project? That would make it a party with a purpose rather than just, showing off, if you will. And then we came up with the idea of, originally we were thinking about the copper pans that the recipient get are really beautiful and significant and custom made and all that. And we're like, oh, we should show those off. They're so pretty. But that became a logistical problem because they're valuable and security and all that. And that morphed into, what if we did a series of dinners with the recipients in their hometowns, and where they're chefs, they can do the food, or where they have a relationship. And so that was sort of the basis. And then we looked at the map, and the geographic coverage was kind of great. We had Los Angeles, Chicago, Tony Tipton Martin relocated to Houston in the process. We have Jose and Danny Nierenberg in DC, and then we have several people in New York. So that's how the venues came about. And so we're about to embark on the fifth one in Madison, Connecticut. Is that right? Fifth or fourth? It's fourth, sorry. The fourth one is in Madison, Connecticut with Jacques Pepin. It's really going to be a delicious dinner at the Madison Beach Hotel, and tickets are still available. As you said, juliachildaward.com/events. And then immediately after Jacques, which was not the original design, we're going down to DC, and we're doing a cocktail party at Jaleo with Jose Andres and Danny Nierenberg. And that's really going to be kind of a preview moment for the gala. So we're going to talk about Alice Waters and what people can expect at the gala, as well as hear an update from Jose and Danny Nierenberg on their work. And we've got, we'll be featuring wines from Virginia and Jaleo tapas. And you can also go to juliachildaward.com/events and get tickets there. That's June 3rd in DC.
That's awesome. Thank you for explaining that. And sorry I lost my video for a second here, but I guess just tell us, moving forward, what, once this 10th anniversary is wrapped up, what else can we expect from the foundation and continuing this legacy?
Well, the boring answer is, I think, more of the same. I feel like we're still in a big growth phase. We're still a pretty young organization. The award is really in its infancy. So we feel like we're in growth mode, and we still think of ourselves very much like a startup. And we're, only, I think, after, whatever, it's been 15 years since the foundation was established, like getting coming up on 20, but getting a hold of like what we're meant to be doing and how we do it and all our systems and processes. So we're really looking at, how do we sustain Julia's legacy over time appropriately? How do we build and grow the award? And how do we also, build and grow some of our events, which are really communication touch points? So, that's what we're looking on and planning on. Maybe Lauren has different expectations than I do.
Well, I work specifically on the grant program. That's one of my main focuses. So I think I get pretty excited about some of those developments. And there's two that I was going to highlight today. One is with an existing grantee, City Tech in Brooklyn, so your neighbor. And we've worked with them for a while on this very cool wine blending program that they do at Red Hook Winery. But they reached out to us about basically a study abroad program that they do in the summer for students that get to travel to France. And they do a bunch of cool stuff and, are really there for a few weeks and immersed in the culture. But what we're specifically funding are some visits and tours to champagne houses. And I think it's just going to be a really special experience and very eye-opening for these, students in a big city college. And, I'm excited about that. Their City Tech's their wine blending program has been really successful over the last few years. So I think we're excited to expand how we work with them. And then another thing is that in the last couple of years, the foundation has wanted to increase or really start funding sustainability programs. And, we're kind of just getting started in that, but we have an exciting grant that's going to this organization called the Land Institute, and they're a research nonprofit, and they work in regenerative grains. Sorry, that's a mouthful for me. And one of the ways that we thought that we could help them was to kind of spread the word about regenerative grains, which I think a lot of people don't really know what those are. So we are working with them to have an event in June in Denver. Todd is going to be there. And the whole idea is for them to work with this restaurant to serve dishes that are made with the grains and really shine the spotlight on the potential for these and educate people on why they're important and how they can be used in restaurant kitchens and home kitchens. So I think it's going to be very cool. I'm quite jealous. I'm not going to be there, but I'll go back. And otherwise, I think on the grant front anyway, I look forward to continuing to work with our grantees like Heritage and just strengthening those bonds and helping more people and inspire and educate.
I would just add to that I left that off, that like one of our big goals is the reason we want to grow is so we can make more grants. And, right now we give out $250,000 a year, and we're not yet at the place where we can really start expanding that, but we love to give out $1 million a year. And, so that's the goal. We're trying to grow to give. And I think the other importance we've seen is the stuff we fund, whether it's nonprofit food media like HRN or Oxford Americans programming, or culinary history research or scholarships, there aren't that many other nonprofit organizations funding those things, as RJ, I probably don't have to tell you. So we feel really committed to the lane that we're in, because it's ultimately harder than just feeding sick children or hungry children. It's a little bit easier asked. So that's also why we're committed to growing it, because we know, sadly, we don't have a lot of competition as much as we'd be happy to have it.
Thank you for sharing all that, and congrats on all the growth. It's awesome. And we appreciate at HRN all the support, and thanks for coming on and giving me all this detail. And I hope people check out the website, which I'll put in the show notes also, and maybe check out an event coming up. Good luck with the rest of us.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you can't make DC, our last event before the gala is going to be September 17th in Los Angeles. That will be a rather pricey one, but it should be exciting with Mary Sue Milliken and Susan Feniger. And then, of course, the big gala to honor the 10th recipient, who's Alice Waters, is October 17th at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. And those tickets are already on sale if you search Smithsonian Food History.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for taking time. It was great talking to you both.
Thanks.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us on.
And thanks to all the listeners and viewers. I'll be back on Thursday with a conversation with a really cool, interesting chef from Chicago. So I'll see you all then. Thank you for tuning in.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick Latham.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.